Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lumos Lens. And my name is Mukunda Krishnaswamy. I'm the CEO and founder of Lumos Learning. I'm thrilled to have a special guest with me today, Dr. Andy Acetola. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let me take a quick second, Andy, and set the stage. We're talking about assessments today. And I know that students, teachers, admins, and even parents don't like the idea of assessments often because it has that burden of feeling judged or the anxiety that comes with high stakes assessments. But at the same time, we all know that assessments are essential, not just for measuring student progress, but truly to advance learning. And you've been exploring SDT, the self determination theory, and how it can reshape our thinking about assessments. Could you walk us through the ABC framework that you have developed and how it supports effective assessments?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So SDT was originally formed to describe intrinsic motivation, which is the most powerful type of motivation. It's more powerful than extrinsic motivation and other kinds. And we kind of took the components of STT and repurposed them for assessment context. So originally, SDT was made up of three major parts. It was autonomy, was one piece that needed to be tapped in order for students to be intrinsically motivated to engage in some task. The second part was relatedness, and they had to feel a sense of belonging with their teachers and their classmates and their classroom community. And then the third and final part is competence. Students had to feel effective at what they were doing. And so we took that framework and we jumbled it up a little bit, but and we tailored it so it would be the ABC framework. So we kept autonomy up front. We now have belonging or belongingness and competence, and we've applied it to assessment context. And this, to my knowledge, hasn't been done frequently because we often think of enhancing engagement at the beginning of a lesson. We think of access points for students and really building a hook, maybe sustaining that high level motivation throughout the lesson. But when it comes time to evaluate our students, I don't think we give I don't think we take full advantage of the opportunity to build in high levels of engagement in assessment context. And that's what the ABC framework is meant to do.
That makes a lot of sense. I would love to hear more about autonomy and how you apply that principle in the context of testing, whether it's a warm up, an exit ticket, or even like a formative or summative. How do you apply that for testing?
So what we mean by autonomy in our framework is that students have a choice and they have a voice in how they're assessed. And some parts of the ABC framework speak directly to when a student is engaged in real time in an assessment and how we can make that more engaging. And some of it is sort of front loading material. So in this example, autonomy could mean enhancing students' assessment literacy. That means familiarizing them with um, the grading criteria and making sure they know the content, that it's been taught well, and making sure that they understand how they will be assessed to give them self-control over how they will be assessed. That's a much more hopeful perspective for a student than to feel sort of doom and gloom while sitting down at a seat right before taking a test. Another part of autonomy could be goal setting and self-regulation. Goal setting, we know, is having students identify where they are in relation to a content standard, where they'd like to be or ought to be, and how to fill that gap in between those 2 points, and how they can monitor their progress to get to that goal. Again, that's all about self-regulation, which is about autonomy and learning how to sort of be the captain of your own ship. And then finally, autonomy is sort of the apex of the um, I do, you do, we do sort of approach. And that autonomy takes it one step further. It's I do, you do, the student does, we do it together, and then you do it again all by yourself because the training wheels are off and um, we trust you to be a competent, able student with a lot of agency. And in assessment contexts, that could be also mean while in an assessment, you talked about formative and summative assessments, um, making sure that students have multiple opportunities to take a formative. Maybe they weren't pleased with the results and their performance. So what better way to grant agency than to have students say, hey, I'd like to do that over again. And best practices suggest that that's the way to do it. Give students as many touch points with an assessment as they ask because they're trying to show mastery. Um, those are just a few ways that autonomy enhances intrinsic motivation and engagement in assessment contexts.
Absolutely, putting the control in the hands of students as much as we can. And we've been building an assessment platform for almost 2 decades now. And these are some of the core principles that guide us in terms of clear instructions for the student. So they know what they're trying to do, right? To ability to even do simple things like, pause a test. Maybe there is an art class that they need to run to. You don't want to disrupt their experience and give them the tools to be able to control how they go through the process. And sometimes we have students that need different accommodations, be it Zoom or text to speech, the IEP accommodations that are needed for some kids, and giving them those tools puts control back in their hands, right? And one of the things, Andy, that I'm super excited about is actually what AI can do in this context, because it gives you that opportunity to provide conversational support as opposed to telling them, hey, there is one way to do it. Instead, they have that guided support when they are actually experiencing assessment. So I think all these really help students feel that they have control and agency, even in a testing environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Giving students agency is always a good idea, and done well, AI can provide that.
Absolutely. So tell me more about belonging. Why is it important? And in the context of an assessment, could you give me some examples?
Sure, absolutely. So belonging is another important aspect of the ABC framework. It's obviously the B, and it's the idea that students need to feel connected to and cared for by their teachers and students. One way to think about this is to talk about being a warm demander. Both teachers and students can be warm demanders. And a warm demander is someone who holds high academic and emotional and social expectations for students, but also does a great job of balancing that with supporting a positive environment for those expectations to come to fruition. And so there are some specific ways we can build belonging into assessment contexts. One is we can have students conference with the teacher or each other. Um, it could be a desk side conference where a teacher pulls up a seat next to a student, and before an assessment, they talk about where that student is and where they they'd like to be and how they plan on getting there. And then, of course, at that point, the teacher would be a warm demander and providing not just empty empty encouragement, but specific strategies about what they see the student does well and how they think that links to them doing well on the assessment. Another way to enhance belongingness and is peer work. Students can be uh, very effective, critical friends to their group members, and with a little bit of guidance, students can also be warm demanders and hold their classmates accountable and be held accountable by their classmates to do well in assessment context and sort of gear themselves up for a positive performance. And then, in um, instances in digital learning platforms where AI is involved, belonging can definitely take place where uh, uh, AI can help a student scaffold their learning and can anticipate and respond to a student perhaps getting stuck or expressing frustration, and that intelligent tutoring system helping that student get back on track and encouraging them to continue and do well and get back into that growth mindset.
You talk about warm demanders. I came across a really cool warm demander this spring, Dr. Willette Jones. She is the professional learning coach at Shelby County in Memphis. And what she did this past spring really blew my mind. She organized the TCAP prep rally. So TCAP is the Tennessee State Assessment, right? So I think about a week before their test, she organized this fun event. All her kids were in an auditorium and few got on the stage. They were singing, dancing. This is like a cheerleading squad. Look at the power of this. They felt like they belonged to a team and they were cheering each other. And it also was a fun event. So in the process, TCAP is no longer a scary thing, right? An assessment could be fun. And if you feel like you're not only doing it for your growth, but also you're part of a team. And when you do well, your team, your school does well. So I love your idea around belonging and how it could really have a huge impact in reducing their anxiety and also motivating kids to do their best.
I love that too. Yeah, that whole school belongingness and rallying around academics and that just, as I said before, it gets students prepared for assessment and front loads this idea of doing well and being excited about doing well because students naturally, and this is part of SDT and the ABC framework, is we want to acknowledge that students naturally want to showcase their talents and stretch their capacities. And assessments can be a place to do that. And if they feel they're autonomous and they feel this sense of belonging and competence, then there's no reason why we can't make assessment engaging.
Yeah, so let's talk about confidence, the sense of, yeah, I can do this.
That's
How
ex
does this help support student success? And what are some practical ways educators can build this into their, assessments or instructional practices?
Yes. So competence is one of the more important factors in the ABC framework. And it refers to the idea that students need to feel effective and capable in their learning and in their actions leading to specific outcomes. Um, we've all felt the sting of feeling incompetent sometimes. It's not a good feeling. It sort of ousts um, our intrinsic motivation, and it can have lasting and devastating effects on our perceived levels of competence in a subject area in the future. And one way to support competence instead of thwart it is to make sure that we're using proper grades. And what I mean by that is we want to make sure that what we're grading does, in fact, represent the content standards we aim to measure. We don't want to measure whether so and so turned in their homework or raised their hand a sufficient amount of times in class on a particular day. We want to keep the integrity of grades clear so that students have a very visible and direct path to how their actions and their learning can lead to a specific grade. And related to that is we might want to withhold grades altogether. Now, I know eventually we have to give a grade. However, we know through many years of evidence that students often either chase grades because they want a higher grade, or they refuse to take risks because they don't want to backslide on a grade that they're pleased with. And that's not what learning is supposed to be. We want students to feel that they can experiment. And then when we have those two things in place, as well as some other factors, then we build students' perceived levels of competence, and they're more willing to take chances and experiment with their learning and feel effective about their learning.
Absolutely. I've seen this in the context of state tests. You think about the anxiety that kids have, right? Especially third graders when they take a state test for the first time. Like, how do I do a drag and drop, right? How do I do a multiple choice, multiple answer? And just what we've learned over the years in working with hundreds of schools is that test simulation could be a really powerful way to build that competence. Because now, instead of taking that high stakes test at the end of the year in spring, if you can incorporate those test taking strategies, help them become familiar with the platform, the simulation could really help reduce their anxiety and builds that confidence and the feeling of, yeah, I can do this because I've done it all throughout the school year. So when I take the test in spring, I'm not surprised by what I need to do. And also, it comes back to what you pointed out about the content mastery and the standards mastery, right? So, other factors such as unfamiliarity with a platform, which could be devastating if a kid isn't familiar and on the day of the test, they're trying to learn what an online test would look like. So, I think, this is a powerful way to build competence and help them feel like, yeah, I can do this test.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want students' cognitive load to be taxed by a drag and drop. We want them to have multiple touch points with assessments so that they can immerse themselves, maybe even enter into a state of, what's called flow, which is being completely engaged with what you're doing and the content, not getting tripped up by little wrinkles in the assessment. And to that point, and to extend it just a bit, we also want students to have a place where they can treat assessments like opportunities to discover themselves and what they know, and to flex their intellect and to experiment and to have a very low stakes environment where they're encouraged to make errors because we learn from our errors. And any assessment system that doesn't account for errors is doing a disservice to students in their learning because we need lots of times, lots of exposure to mistakes so that we come out with a deeper learning and sense of the content.
That's really important, Andy. Having that safe, supporting assessment environment, it's super important. Uh, at Lumos, for example, we kind of believe in building a GPS for assessments and learning. And the idea is exactly that. You miss an exit, no worries. We're going to bring you back to where you need to be. And in our context, it's the standards mastery. So I'm struggling in a standard, no worries. Help build that competence, help them catch up and come back to where they need to be. And one of the effective methods that we have applied in the Step Up program is the I do, we do, you do methodology. And as educators, we love this approach of, showing them what they need to do, giving them an opportunity to do it, and then if they continue to struggle, standing over their shoulders and helping them figure it out, right? And what is super exciting to me is how AI can truly transform this we do component, because now the conversational component could be so supportive. It's just like having a personal tutor who is watching over my shoulders and very forgiving and encouraging. So it's okay to make a mistake in the second step. And then it guides you to the point of saying, hey, go check your calculation in step two. You got the first part right. And then it's some of the capabilities around translating it to a language that the kid is comfortable with, um, or just being able to put the guardrails so that they don't get distracted. So it's structure as well as support. I think that goes a long way towards building that competence and making them feel like they got this.
Yeah, I agree. No, we don't want students to ever fall between the cracks or to be made that to feel that they can't do something. We want to keep spirits high so we can keep hope high and ability high.
And thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I love this idea of ABC framework, something that's grounded in deep research and something that most educators are already using. But I think applying this in the context of an assessment could lead to great outcomes. And I'm sure our listeners would find this conversation valuable. By the way, I'm looking forward to your upcoming white paper on this topic.
Me too, Mukunda. I'm having fun working on it, and it's a fun, novel idea of making making assessments engaging. You know, you don't often hear a student say, "Hey, that test was really fun." But I think there's a lot of room to enhance motivation and engagement in assessment contexts and make it more of a meaningful experience instead of something we just do at the end to capture student outcomes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you, Makanda. Take care.
You too.